I don't think in any situation in Azerbaijan where you have a grandfather with his son and grandson go to fighting. I don't think there are any brothers, twin brothers with their sisters going to fight. And this is what's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh. This is not about oil. This is not about saving gold mines in Nagorno-Karabakh, but it's about self-determination and fighting for the existence of Armenians in the region.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of Faces of Armenia, we warmly welcome you to another special series on Artsakh. Our distinguished guest today, Dr. Bedross Der Matossian, is an associate professor of Middle East history and the vice chair of the Department of History at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Nebraska. He is also the president of the Society for Armenian Studies and author of multiple volumes on Armenian history. But before we get started, allow us to drop a quick note on the format. Our special series on Artsakh offers experts from a broad spectrum of disciplines a platform to share their perspectives and to reflect on Nagorno-Karabakh. By elevating their perspectives, we hope to add to the substance of ongoing discussions, strengthening mediating forces, both of which advance an unmistakable impetus to find and define an agreeable, timely, and hopefully lasting end to the war. We, Faces of Armenia, see ourselves as a bridge between Armenia and the international community, calling and enabling productive relationships and positive engagement. But without further ado, dear Bedross, if you could kindly introduce yourself, add a word or two to your background, person, and personality.
Sure. Thank you, Konstantin, for inviting me to your series, Faces of Armenia. I was born and raised in the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem, East Jerusalem. I graduated from St. Starkmanchat School at the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem, then continued my studies at the Hebrew University. I started my graduate studies there in Islamic studies, and then moved to Columbia, where I graduated from Columbia with a dissertation on the Young Turks, and then taught at MIT for a few years. And now I am based at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. My areas of interest include ethnic politics, ethnic violence, comparative genocide, modern Middle East history, Armenian history, and Palestinian history. I'm currently finalizing a book on the Adana massacres of 1909, which would be published next year by Stanford University Press. My first book was called Shattered Dreams of Revolution, which was published again by Stanford University Press. And I'm a quantilingual person. I speak many languages and use double of that in my research. I'm also the president of the Society for Armenian Studies. It's the largest academic organization in the Western Hemisphere, which has around 300 members. Most of them are academicians, scholars, and graduate students in the field.
Thank you very much for this succinct yet descriptive intro. And obviously, the reason of our conversation is not a bright one today. And as a well-read history scholar, could you maybe help us explain through which lens, through which framework one can well understand the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict?
Of course, the Artsakh conflict is not new. It didn't happen today. Its roots goes back to the Soviet Union, the beginning of the Soviet Union, when the territory was given by Joseph Stalin to Azerbaijan. it became kind of the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast, and eventually it had its own kind of semi-autonomous status. But things were dictated by Baku, Azerbaijan. There was a lot of discrimination of its population. These are basic, simple historical notes that everyone knows. The population faced discrimination. The majority of the Karabakh population composed of Armenians. And eventually in 1988, the Karabakh movement starts, asking for autonomy and asking for first union with Armenia in 1991. They do a referendum, and the results of the referendum is the majority of them want to be part of Armenia. And of course, Azerbaijan at the time did not like whatever was happening on the ground, and it's this anti-Armenian propaganda led to the Sumgait massacres, and after that, the Baku massacres, and eventually led to a major war that began at the start in 1991 and lasted until the Bishkek Protocols ceasefire in 1994. But ceasefire does not mean end of war. In this case, ceasefire was basically aimed at putting the war temporarily on hold. And from 1994 until today, there has been skirmishes on the border. The last one was, the major one was 2016. And after that, 2018. But this one is the biggest war that has been waged on Nagorno-Karabakh by Azerbaijan, motivated and directed by the Republic of Turkey with its President Erdogan, with the aid of terrorist mercenaries coming from Syria. And of course, the aim is capitulation of Nagorno-Karabakh. The idea in the beginning was that this would be a blitzkrieg, and eventually within a week they were able to occupy Nagorno-Karabakh. That did not happen, and the war it's in its 40th or 41st day now, and there are a lot of casualties on both sides. But again, Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh did not give up. Some territories were lost, but they're putting fierce fighting. And I would like to also indicate here the power asymmetry between the Nagorno-Karabakh and the Azeri forces. Karabakh population, everyone knows, is formed by 150,000 people. Majority of them now have left. About 70, 80, or 90 even have left Karabakh to Armenia for safe haven. Thousands are still live there under the bunkers. And imagine you have total Turkey and Azerbaijan about 90 million people fighting against 3 million people. But to put things into context here too is that the Artsakh defense forces are minimum, are small in comparison to the forces of Azerbaijan and Turkey, because there are Turkish commanders on the field on the side of Azerbaijan who are directing the war. Azerbaijan, due to its richness, it's an oil-producing autocratic country. It's an authoritarian country, by the way. And having access to the latest weaponry is using those to destroy Armenian cities, kill civilians in the capital, in Stepanakert, in Shushi. And due to its access to money, it's able to buy the latest technology. Specifically, that's from Israel. UAVs from Israel, which play an important role in targeting both civilian structures and also Armenian soldiers on the front.
Thank you very much. I think that gives us a very good foundation to understand the origins better. And in the beginning, you said something very interesting, that it started at the formation of the Soviet Union. So we all know that in 1921, when Stalin came to the living room apartment to the meeting, and that on the second day, suddenly Nagorno-Karabakh was just given to Azerbaijan. So if Stalin would have not participated in this meeting, do you think could we have seen a very different future?
We historians do not use the if category in defining history, but of course we have to understand this is the Soviet rule. It's the idea of divide and conquer, and all of these measures taken by Stalin was aimed actually to create this discord and conflict and create tensions among different ethnic groups. So eventually, these are what Stalin did, was putting time bombs in different places within the region that would erupt eventually, which happened with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And one thing we have to understand is that the population of Nagorno-Karabakh is fighting for self-determination. The same that happened in Kosovo and other places. They're fighting for self-determination, for independence. And this is not about imperial project or anything, but you have here a tiny population within a tiny piece of land who is fighting for its self-determination against major powers, I should say, both Turkey and Azerbaijan, who are equipped with the latest technology, but also with the barrage of propaganda and fake news. And also, what's interesting within this phase of conflict is the intoxicated neutrality of the Western media and Western powers. The timing is important, Konstantin, of the war. COVID-19. Everyone is busy with COVID-19 presidential elections. Mind you that today the Azeri forces have increased their bombing of Stepanakert and Shushi because the election results are not in yet. So hopefully, we're sure that Biden is going to win the election. So September, October is extremely important from the perspective of the Azeris, that no US president is going to take a major step towards the conflict. So that's done. COVID is there. Everyone is busy. And it's also part of Turkey's expansionist policy within the region, whether it's Mediterranean, whether it's Syria, whether it's Libya. And this is another front that Turkey has opened in the Caucasus to create instability in that region. Of course, this has to do with the Russo-Turkish conflict within different parts of the Middle East too. So we have to take into consideration that Nagorno-Karabakh is not only a fight between Azerbaijan and Armenia, it has also global dimensions, regional and global dimensions to it.
Yeah, and I think you well exemplify how it is absolutely not a local war between two powers, but a war with global stakeholders involved. And can you help us understand this evolution of Weil in this context, maybe with the start of the Sumgait and Baku massacres? Who were the perpetrators of the massacre, specifically which groups? And how did the first war play out after from the 90s to 1994?
Of course, during these events of self-determination and the referendum that happened in Nagorno-Karabakh and the demand to join the Armenia, when all of these are taking place, there is a rage against Armenians of wanting to leave Azerbaijan and attach themselves to Armenia. there is an anti-Armenian phobia that's raging in different parts of Azerbaijan, and we see the reaction of that, the repercussions of that anti-Armenian phobia or anti-Armenianism in the massacres of Sumgayit and Baku. Of course, there is also the massacres of Khojali perpetrated by some Armenian troops. Just as a historian, we have to be also we have to also be balanced in our approach. But the war 1994 resulted with major humanitarian disaster, I should say. The war did not start with Armenians having the upper hand. This is 1991-94. Of course, Armenians, there was a period that Armenians were losing the war. They were on the losing side. But the resilience of the Armenian soldiers, the resilience of the volunteers, the resilience of the Armenians who came from the diaspora to fight for this land led to gradual reclaiming back the territories and ending with the defeat of Azerbaijan. And of course, that defeat created a major trauma in the collective memory within Azerbaijan, which has been used and is being used by Aliyev's authoritarian regime in order to crush any opposition within Azerbaijan. Mind you, that Azerbaijan has a lot of internal problems. It's an authoritarian country. There is a lot of poverty, but the Aliyev's family, who skims billions of dollars. There is the, Azerbaijan's Laundromat, scandal where they skim millions of dollars to buy assets in Great Britain. So everyone knows about it. This is not something new. While you have also poor Azerbaijan population and also refugees from the first war are living in a dire situation, which haven't been supported by the government at all. So on the other hand, in addition to Azeris fleeing the 1994 war, you have also hundreds of thousands of Armenians now who have left Baku, and they were well-to-do Armenians, left everything behind and were kicked out of Baku, and all of those live in different parts of Armenia and also in the left to the diaspora. So 1994 had put an end to the war with the ceasefire, but that mentality of the grudge and the Armenophobia still remained in Azerbaijan, and it has been fueled actually by Aliyev's regime, who is unwilling to come into a compromise regarding any future peace process, any future peace settlement, who does not want to take an honest role within the peace process. I believe in mutual compromise, but what we see until today from the Azeri perspective, they're not ready to compromise anything. The Azerbaijani side wants the 7 additional territories outside Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, now all of them are Nagorno-Karabakh, in exchange for nothing, actually. If you see the Madrid principles, the Kazan principles, even the Lavrov ones, they do not put the priority of discussing the future of Nagorno-Karabakh first. They call it step by step, meaning that let's start returning these territories, 5, then 2, and then we'll see what could be done about Nagorno-Karabakh. Well, I mean, this small portion of territory lost half of its population maybe during the first war. Thousands of young soldiers were killed. Until today, maybe 12 or 1,300 young Armenians were killed in the war. And you cannot put on the table a formula that says we're going to discuss Nagorno-Karabakh towards the end, the future of Nagorno-Karabakh towards the end. First and foremost, the integrity, territorial integrity, and the safety of the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh, of Artsakh, has to be determined, has to be guaranteed as part of self-determination, as part of independence. And Nagorno-Karabakh leadership, the president, the parliament, the delegation, everyone has to have a saying about their future. This is not only about Armenia, Azerbaijan, this is mostly about the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh. So when Pashinyan came into power in 2018, he reiterated the fact that Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, has to be part of the negotiating team, negotiating process. And this is something that did not sit well with the Azeri regime, because the previous presidents in Armenia were inclined towards going through with the Madrid principles, with the Kazan principles and others. And when you have a democratically elected, or with the Velvet Revolution, when Pashinyan came into power with the Velvet Revolution, a new democratic phase began in Armenia. Armenia today is the only true democracy in the region, maybe Georgia too. But unlike Azerbaijan, unlike other places in the region, they're not democratic. So you have a democratically elected president who now, based on democratic values, asking for the right of Armenians of Artsakh to decide their future, whether they want independence, internationally recognized, or whether they want to be part of Armenia. And that's what's happening. Unlike Azerbaijan's point of view, Azerbaijan wants full capitulation of all the parts of Nagorno-Karabakh with its current settings, meaning the 5+2 territories, sections, and in addition to that, Nagorno-Karabakh. If Nagorno-Karabakh would become part of Azerbaijan, that would mean ethnic cleansing in the minimum sense and genocide in the maximum sense. Because no Armenian is going to live under the leadership, under the rule of Nagorno-Karabakh. A few days ago, Aliyev said that he is ready to provide autonomy, cultural autonomy to Nagorno-Karabakh. Well, I think that train has passed in 1988. Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh wouldn't want any such framework. If you ask me, they would like two things: either independence recognized internationally, or unity with Armenia, become part of Armenia. So these are the two options that are on the table for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. And they have the right for self-determination.
But so for future, Azerbaijan, in one way or another, has to sit on the table because they have to stop their aggressions, which makes me think, can you describe the evolution of the Azeri negotiation potential from Haidar to Ilham Aliyev?
Well, as far as I know, the negotiation has been the same, but the rhetoric has changed dramatically from Haidar Aliyev to the current president, his son. Of course, it's an authoritarian regime, so the son inherits the position, and he appoints his wife as the vice president. So it's a weird system if you think about it. During Ilham's period, now currently, the rhetoric of war and anti-Armenianism has become more aggressive in Azerbaijan. This has mainly to do of the two things too. You know, once you see that your authoritarian regime is shaky, and that's what was happening with the rising opposition, poverty, lack of democracy, journalists being imprisoned, and many other sort of authoritarian regime, the only way to consolidate your power is to direct it to Nagorno-Karabakh and create a war. I mean, the negotiation process has been going, and the Minsk group has been active in coming into somehow some type of an agreement. But again, it seems from Azeri's perspective, it has lost patience. That's what they argue actually, with the stalemate of the peace process. They say that they no more have confidence in the Minsk group, and they're going to do it through the means of arms, through military measures. And of course, we have always think the following, that Azerbaijan would not have dared to go alone with its own capabilities to war without Turkish support or Turkish instructions. So Turkey, to that extent, in this calculation, plays a dominant role. And Turkey wants to be in the chairman group of the Minsk group, in part of the chairman, in order to decide the fate of the Caucasus and Nagorno-Karabakh. But that's something that is that's objectionable from Armenia, but also from Russia to that extent. They don't want Turkey to be part of the Caucasus. But again, thinking about about Erdogan's large expansionist policy outside Turkey and bullying, Erdogan is the bully of the region, if you think about it. Libya, Syria, playing games with Greece, and also the Caucasus now. It emboldened actually Ilham Aliyev to go to the war, because my father is backing me in this. Okay, and if you see the discourse, the anti-Armenian discourse within Turkey, it's very, very dangerous actually. And if you see their media, which is mostly controlled by the state, if it's TRT News or it's the Yeni Shafak newspaper, all of those newspapers and media networks, if you check them, it's as if Turkey, which is, it is actually, but if you see it, as if Turkey is in the war itself, right? And we know for sure that Turkish commanders, intelligence personnel, everyone is in Azerbaijan actually on the front, directing these operations.
So how did the evolution of Turkey's role come about? Because in the first war, in 1992 to 1994, they were 1991. I'm sorry, and they were not as involved, or not really involved. The key stakeholders were Azerbaijan and Armenia, as well as some international mercenaries. But we have a very scale right now. How did it come about?
Well, if you think at that time, we do not see a major expansionist policy on behalf of Turkey. Of course, Turkey at the time took also measures in terms of closing the border with Armenia and other types of measures, but not to this severity. And Turkey did not have an expansionist policy of neo-Ottomanism, of kind of pan-Islamic neo-Ottomanism, which we see today happening within Turkey. When Erdogan came to power, actually, he provided some hope to the international community of a moderate Islamist group. But eventually what we see today is that image has been shattered for so many years. Even his close confidants have left him actually, like Davutoglu and others who created their own party. And the current policy of Turkey, even after the Arab Spring, is to create a clout in not only in Turkey or the region, but in the Islamic world, and most importantly in the Arab world. I mean, the only country that's very close to Turkey in the Arab world is Qatar. That has to do also with their mutual enemy, which is Saudi Arabia. So Erdogan plays with fire, actually, plays on different causes such as the Palestinian cause in order to for internal consumption and in order to create popularity, his image as a popular leader who's able to defy Israel and who's able to defy the United States in order to protect the Palestinians. Whereas if you see under the table, billions of dollars of military contracts and businesses are being done with Israel. So, I mean, so that's kind of a deception, as you see. But some segments within the Arab population do buy this kind of fake commitment to the Palestinian cause or the Arab cause. So I would say that this war wouldn't have taken place without Erdogan's backing, without Erdogan's expansionist policy. So the Nagorno-Karabakh population, thousands of fighters, are not fighting Azerbaijan per se only. They're fighting Turkey and they're fighting the mercenary groups who are coming from Syria. And those mercenaries are a different story themselves.
So I very much like how you exemplify Erdogan's role in here. As a historian, do you think it is the role of the international community to identify dangerous personality traits of dictatorial leaders in order to prevent emergence of such as Mr. Erdogan's?
Well, Erdogan is not alone in this category because right-wing populist parties have been rising in the West, in the U.S., in the West. See Orban, Italy, so many other places. So what I think is that Erdogan is able to manipulate the condition of the region in terms of the refugees who left Syria or were forced to leave Syria and come to Turkey. So that has been a major kind of a key that Erdogan holds with his relations to Germany, for example. Okay, refugees and the 2 million Turkish German citizens who live in Germany. See, for example, the way in which the Turkish regime wants to create instability within different countries in Europe. See what happened in France with the anti-Armenian movements, mainly directed by the Grey Wolves. Grey Wolves are the militant wing of the Turkish Nationalist Party. They attacked different They attacked Armenians, and eventually you have these Grey Wolf mobs actually roaming in Lyon and other cities and crying, "We're looking for Armenians." And from the Armenian perspective, this is kind of a threat to their safetyness and existence in a country that believes in democracy. And immediately, Macron's government took the decision of banning the Grey Wolves in the country, and hopefully now there's the Green Party in Germany, who is also trying to pass a law to ban the Grey Wolves in Germany because they're a militant, dangerous group who are directed by the Turkish government to create chaos and instability, and target Armenians in different parts of Europe.
So we are taking a more geopolitical perspective here, and I think that is important. The European Union, from the very beginning, had the poster child Turkey. They wanted to integrate Turkey. So right now it falls on their back. Isn't that now in the interest of the European Union to support Armenia effectively, whether diplomatically, humanitarian aid, or even with an intervention?
Well, European countries have different interests with Turkey and Azerbaijan. See, for example, the British stance, which has been very biased towards Azerbaijan, and that has to do with the BP, British Petroleum, biggest investor in Azerbaijan, benefits from many things. But also, a lot of European countries benefit from the gas that comes from Azerbaijan through the Baku-Ceyhan pipeline. And so there is self-interest. But beyond this, also, there is unwillingness to take part In this case, national interest win over morality, over human rights violation. So you see European countries sitting and not acting or doing anything. The only country that went so far as condemning these attacks and trying to do something is France. And maybe that has to do with the large Armenian population within France who lobbied and are pushing the government to do so. But to that extent, we don't see something happening from the German side, and everyone is standing now, and they don't want to bother or annoy the lion in the east, supposedly the lion in the east, which is Erdogan, because they know that Erdogan is erratic in his behavior sometimes, in making decisions and yelling and shouting and insulting foreign leaders. To that extent, Armenia is and Armenians, both in the diaspora and Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, are very disappointed from the international community. Where, if you think about it, the first human rights violation would be that no country should wage a war against another country during COVID-19. If you ask me, that's the first violation of human rights. So that's a crime of itself, attacking another country during COVID-19. Second, it has to do with the human rights violation and crimes against humanity that has been perpetrated by the Azeri soldiers against Armenians, cutting heads, cutting ears, mutilations of bodies, and many other forms of violent actions against Armenians. So if European Union or other countries do not intervene in this, then I do not see the end result positive. Armenians are going to fight for their existence. This is not about fight only for this portion of territory. It's a fight for existence. It's an existential threat that the Armenians are facing, not only Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh who are on the front, but also Armenians within Armenia themselves. Because Armenians now do believe that this is a modern type of genocide that's going to take place. And despite the fact that they are yelling and shouting and trying to mobilize foreign powers, there is a total deafness within the European countries, within the United States per se. And there is a hope that when Biden comes to power here in the US, that something is going to change. And that's why it seems that the Azeris are increasing their bombing of Stepanakert and Shushi in order to try to, quote unquote, achieve the maximum before a new president comes into power in the United States.
So I really liked the presentation of the lack of interest of the international community. And that really brings us to the framework of resolution mechanisms. The Minsk Group, since in 1992, if I remember correctly, has been trying to resolve this conflict unsuccessfully. Co-chairs France, Russia, USA. Isn't it inevitable that this solution, that this framework cannot work?
I still think that the OSCE is the only way to solve it. And I think that the diplomatic way is the only way to solve this conflict. The military aggression by Azerbaijan, Turkey, is not going to solve this problem. On the contrary, it would lead to a more stalemate within all the parties involved in the conflict. And again, I think, as I said earlier, the Azerbaijan, if it was alone, it would have still be part of the OSCE peace process. But due to dynamics of power, changes in the dynamics of power in the region, and the rise of Erdogan, and his bullying within the region, and also giving a lot of assurances and confidence to Aliyev to start the war, then Aliyev said, why should I even deal with the OSCE? I'm going to solve this with my own aggression, and that's the only way we're going to solve it. And there is no more, there shouldn't be any more interference of the Europeans, Russians, the French, and the Americans in our own problem. But if you think from the other hand too, Russia has remained silent during this whole scenario of the aggression against Armenians, and its silence has been interpreted in many ways. Some argue that that despite the fact that the Armenia is part of SISTO, or even Armenia in 1997 has signed a mutual defense agreement, bilateral agreement with Russia, that as far as Armenia per se is not attacked, Russia is not going to intervene. However, numerous times Armenia has been attacked. Armenia, current Republic of Armenia, the latest was in the village of David Peg, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and still nothing is happening in terms of this this coalition, this kind of alliance. So to that extent, what I think is that Armenians are alone in this, and they know that they're alone, but I think that they're going to fight until the end, because they're not going to allow Azerbaijan to capitulate on Nagorno-Karabakh. And mind you that in comparison to what's happening in Armenia and Azerbaijan, there is a lot of transparency in Armenia. Every day, the spokesperson of the defense ministry, Arjun Hovhannisyan, every day provides an update regarding the operations in Nagorno-Karabakh, the number of soldiers that have been killed. We do not see anything of that sort happening in Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan knows that it has very large amount of soldiers lost in the front. They know that if they start opening the can, it would backfire against them. So that's why social media is not allowed in Azerbaijan, by the way. It's only Twitter that's working in Azerbaijan, and we do not see any updates from the government to transparent updates. I'm not talking about propaganda updates, transparent updates about the condition on the front, about how many people were lost. And if you think about these mercenaries, for example, that were brought by Turkey from Syria, part of the Syrian National Army, was not now lost its prestige and its honor, because it's become a puppet in the hands of Erdogan, once sending a brigade to Libya, another time to Azerbaijan. Those fighters actually came, some of them didn't know where they were going actually. And they constitute the forefront of the battle, meaning that the Azeris are in the back and they're on the front. So from the Azeri perspective, those should be killed first, and then we can continue. And everyone knows that today there are more than 2,000 Syrian mercenaries fighting in Azerbaijan, on Azerbaijan's side. And Azerbaijan has resources, despite the fact that the war has caused a major economic blow to Azerbaijan, but still it has resources. Flights go from Turkey to Azerbaijan, from Israel to Azerbaijan, sending weapons, the latest weapons, and money. There is money, and the money buys weapons, but it does not buy justice. That's what I want to emphasize here. Money buys weapon, but does not buy the spirit of these soldiers 18, 19 years old on the front of Nagorno-Karabakh, fighting for them, for themselves, for their families, for their territory, for their existence. And I don't think in any situation in Azerbaijan where you have a grandfather with his son and grandson go to fighting. You don't have. I don't think there are any brothers, twin brothers with their sisters going to fight. And this is what's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh. This is not about oil. This is not about saving gold mines in Nagorno-Karabakh. There is no gold mines. There are no oil. But it's about self-determination and fighting for the existence of Armenians in the region.
Your words deeply touched me. And I want to also share that we are in touch with families in Pakistan that offer us account on how certain religious parties pay young sons to fight and kill Armenians. And which brings me, in the beginning, you mentioned there's a threat of genocide. There's a threat of ethnic cleansing. So can you reflect on that a little more? Can that become a war between Islam and Christianity, or is this comparison completely off?
First of all, this is not about Christianity against Islam. This is an ethnic conflict. It's an ethnic conflict. The aim is to capitulate on the territory, despite the fact that Azerbaijan uses religion to that extent. One thing I have to also emphasize here is that most of those fighters who are coming from Syria and other places or Pakistan, they're coming with religious ideology that, as one recent captured mercenary said, they told us that we're going to fight the kuffar, the infidels. And the kuffar, or the Turkish version is gavur, was an important concept used by the Turks during the Armenian genocide in relating to the other Armenians as infidels. It's a derogatory term. Until today, some Turks use it, referring to Armenians as gavur Ermeniler, the Armenian infidels. So whenever you say that word, it's like the N word in the United States. Whenever you say these types of things, it's also derogatory and dehumanization of the other. It's a dehumanization of the process of the other. So when these groups are fighting, they have in their minds that they're fighting the Christians, and they see it as a kind of a reward, both financially but also religiously. All right. As one recent captured fighter from these groups who said that in addition to the $2,000 they promised them to be paid for fighting monthly against the Armenians, they also rewarded $100 for every Armenian head, meaning they would cut the heads of the Armenians for $100. And Armenians started, on social media saying, well, I mean, my head worth $100. So such mentality that's totally different of what the Azeri groups are fighting for. I don't think they're religiously motivated; they're ethnically motivated. But this religious ethnic mixture seems to be on the table on the Azeri side, and if you think about it, these soldiers, these mercenaries who are coming from Syria, this is not part of their cause. Their cause was Bashar al-Assad, to fight against the authoritarian rules of Bashar al-Assad. But now they got corrupted. They became a tool in the hands of Turkey, who would move them from one side to another. And even, the idea of fighting Christians do not hold ground anymore, because they're fighting in Libya against the other power, within Libya. They're fighting in Syria against the other Syrians, Muslim Syrians. But when they come to such places as Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan, they are truly believing that they're fighting for religious beliefs. but that's a manipulation of the Azeri regime in order to convince them to fight. Some of them have already, as far as I know, expressed their regret about even taking this decision to come into to fight in Nagorno-Karabakh, seeing the intensity of the Armenian fighters in protecting their home. So this is not, having said all of this, this is not a religious war. It's an ethnic war. That religion has been used sometimes from the part of Turkey and Azerbaijan in order to gain points for its constituencies, but also for their followers in the Arab world. I mean, there are a lot of people within the Arab world that believe that that believe that Azerbaijan has the right to capitulate on Nagorno-Karabakh. They see it as Islam versus Christianity, but in reality, this is not the case, and many people know about this. So.
And then talking about intensity, as it is already a multi-stakeholder complex war with other components than ethnicity, but predominantly an ethnic clash. So is there a mechanism to find a lasting resolution other than, say, the Minsk group? Can international civic society be involved? Can the diaspora be involved? Or is it only a return to a frozen conflict available?
That's a good question. I mean, unless this conflict is not resolved with mutual compromise, unless this conflict is not resolved once and for all, what we're going to have is another ceasefire with a stalemate situation, which would erupt in another 20, 30 years. And that has to do also with the intervention and the power of the international community. The international community is in a frozen situation now. They claim it's due to COVID, but they don't want to be part of this conflict. But I think the only thing that exists now is the OSCE framework, and that's where we have to go back and sit on the table, and there needs to be a mutual compromise from all sides involved. But having said that, I think the population of Karabakh, with its leadership, has to have the first saying about what compromises does it want to have. It's not Armenia that has to decide on the compromises. It's not Azerbaijan that has to decide about the compromises, if there are or needs to be compromises. These are the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh that have to decide about these compromises. It's not the diaspora. So the most important thing is to give agency and power to the Nagorno-Karabakh representative in this conflict, because until now, they haven't been part of the peace process. Armenia has been conducting the peace process on their behalf. And I do think that they need to have the final saying in this. And it's not to become part of a major power agreement that they will be only a minuscule entity who are being forced to accept something they don't want.
So you actually bring up a brilliant point. What implication had Robert Kocharyan? He was prime minister or president of Nagorno-Karabakh, and then he led the negotiation process representing Armenia. And secondly, why is it that so little attention was paid to Nagorno-Karabakh, that should be the key stakeholder in any decision? And lastly, I'm sorry, now it's 3 questions. I know you're not supposed to do that, but there have been many frameworks proposed for reconciliation of territorial integrity and the right to self-determination. Are we beyond a point of implementation of such, or no?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the aggressor in this case is Nagorno-Karabakh. Aggressor in this case is Azerbaijan, because it launched the war on September 27. And from what we understand is that Azerbaijan wants to capitulate. It's not about returning the 7 districts. It's not about returning 7 districts, and it's not about let's talk about a fair future of Nagorno-Karabakh. It's about capitulation, and that's what really caused a major problem. Coming to Kocharian himself is from Nagorno-Karabakh. And again, during his tenure and negotiations, as far as I know, Artsakh was not part of the negotiating team. It's only when Pashinyan comes into power that he says that Artsakh leadership should be part of the negotiating team. Artsakh is an unrecognized republic. It's a democratic republic that elects its officials, and it has its own parliament. I've visited Artsakh. It's a beautiful place, very generous, vibrant population, and but they were living under the shadow of another war, and that war actually materialized today. So I think I'm not going to put aside the Minsk framework. I think everyone has to sit on table within the Minsk framework and rethink about what's happening here, because this is a new reality that has been created. It's not only Azerbaijan, it's Turkey, terrorists within the region now posing a lot of threat not only to Russia but to Iran too. So there needs to be a larger kind of a commitment from all sides in order to once and for all resolve the conflict in the region. But that's not something that I see it happening today in the region, and I think the aggression of aggression of Azerbaijan against Nagorno-Karabakh has become a major key to the deterioration of relations, to the establishment of mutual trust for a future negotiation, and I think this war is going to continue as long as there is no major superpower who is going to impose on Azerbaijan to stop its aggression. And United States could play that role, I think, and we're going to see that because Russia is not acting. 3 ceasefires that were agreed upon were violated by the side of the Azerbaijani side. If you think about it, why would Armenia violate ceasefire? It wants peace, it wants a halt and an end of the conflict. But Azerbaijan, thinking of having the upper hand in the conflict, they think that it's in their interest to continue with the war in order to get more territories. And the idea here, from their perspective, is that once we already have territories, our negotiations in the future would demand much more in these negotiations, because we already have guaranteed a large section. But these, even during the first war, Karabakh War, 1991-94, Armenians were I remember those days, in a condition that they thought that they were losing half of the territory or most of the territory, but eventually things turned around and they were able to win the war. So having a few districts being occupied by Azerbaijan does not mean a victory for Azerbaijan. And that's something that you would see Azerbaijan doing for internal consumption, because people want to have something in hand and that's what he wants actually. Aliyev wants Shushi, which is the important city for Karabakh, but also for Azeris. So it's a symbolic city for them. And once they have that, he can go and say, oh, we've got Sushi.
I'm so sorry, you bomb a historic city with monuments, millennia old, and then you have a destroyed city. Where's the logic in that?
Yeah, but from his perspective, they want, from the latest news, the soldiers who are fighting on the Shushi front have the flags of Azerbaijan in their hand. The idea is to just take a section of Shushi, put the flag there, and then take a picture and send it back to Azerbaijan to declare kind of a victory in order to satisfy the population.
But then I can say the Azerbaijani leadership is not inexperienced in Photoshop. Maybe they could try something.
Yeah, of course. I mean, fake photos, rockets in the middle of tables, etc. These are fascinating things that we see today happening on the Azeri side. But one thing I would like to reiterate here is that I think in the future Azerbaijan is going to suffer its repercussions of this war from its own population, because everyone now has lost someone they know on the front within Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan's project or the plan of capitulating on Nagorno-Karabakh within a week did not work. And now we're entering winter, and fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh during the winter, it's extremely difficult. And so I don't know what's the plan here. Or I mean, it's not my own business as to what Azeris are thinking, but this war actually would have a repercussion on Azerbaijan and its government and its regime. I would say regime, because regime is the word that highlights an authoritarian kind of rule, which is not democratically elected, as you know. Yeah.
Yeah, good observation. Dear Bedross, so while all our thoughts, hopes, and minds are on Nagorno-Karabakh, on the wall right now, but what do you think, what needs to happen once we have a sustainable stalemate, a sustainable ceasefire? What are the implications? What are the next steps?
Well, I can't say what would be the next step. I think the leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia and Azerbaijan, with major powers involved, should sit and decide the future of the region. But again, if you ask me who should be on the table, the first entity should be the leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh, because it's their country, it's their region, and it's their fight. This is not, and after that, it's the fight of Armenia, and it's the fight of the Armenian diaspora too. So all of these entities are interconnected, I should say. They're not separate entities. Artsakh is connected to Armenia, Armenia is connected to its diaspora. So these three entities are interconnected, and that's why whatever happens in Artsakh affects on Armenia and affects on the diaspora.
Bedross, we're coming to the end. We warmly thank you for your perspectives, for your substantiated arguments, and turn the floor to you. Do you have any concluding remarks or so?
No. I think this war shouldn't have taken place. If you ask me, a lot of innocent people died in this war. One part defending their existence, defending the right for self-determination, and the other part who died was for the sake of their authoritarian regime, which are the Azeris. As Araik Harutyunyan, the president of Nagorno-Karabakh, said, this fight is not against the Azeri population, it's against the Azeri people. The fight is against Aliyev's regime, backed by Erdogan's regime. So,
thank you very much.